Hi, Steve, Woodworking Masterclass. In Season 2 of the TV series Woodworking Masterclass, I made some boxes, and they were pretty close to these. That's one of them. That's another one that I've made since. But this is a very popular size box, and I make a lot of them. And in the show, what I referred to is some templates that I make up and keep in an envelope. I've had a couple of emails to ask me how to make the templates. So I'll show you step by step how you can make a template for a popular box that you might want to build more than one of. Now the boxes I make are 250 wide and 200 deep. So the first thing I have to do, using this part here as my straight edge, the very first thing I've got to do is give myself a square. I draw down here. And if you can see that, that obviously isn't square. So I'll trim that later. But because I've got a straight edge here, it's just a matter of then putting it on my docking saw and I can get that nice and straight. Now, from this edge, I'll measure down 250. In fact, what I do, I measure a little bit more than 250. I'll measure maybe 260. And the reason for that is, when I cut my stock up to make a box, I want everything just a little bit oversized. It's not until I trim down to final size that I want accuracy. It's another thing I've mentioned many times. Get a little bit of wet and dry, about 240 grit, double-sided tape, very fine double-sided tape. If you put it on the back of your rulers and your squares, it gives you much more control over your square. Square that up, carry the line across, and continue it down. So now we've got 260 mil going that way, and as I said, my depth of my boxes is 200, so I'll cut this at about 210. That's the initial drawing up. Now what I'll do is cut that out as a square panel, or rectangular panel. Now what I'll do is take it over to the table saw. Alright, that's cut up. That's a bit of scrap with a bit of plywood. We'll deal with that later. And that's an oversized shape of all that I need to build the boxes. Now we start marking it out. Now the depth of the box is, I've got to do them about 90 mil. But here's something you've got to think about. How are you going to cut your box lid off? Because you're going to lose a bit of height depending on what saw you use. If you use a Japanese saw and you're going to do it by hand, you're going to lose very, very little. I think it's about 0.7 or 0.8 of a mil. But if you're going to do it on a bandsaw, you could lose a mil. I prefer to cut my box lids off on the table saw, and I know my blade is 3 mil. So if I wanted my finished box size to be 90 mil, I would then actually mark it out as 93 mil, because I'm going to lose 3 mil on the blade cut. In this particular case, I know I cut them at 90 mil, and when I've cut them down, I end up at 87 mil. So that's something worth thinking about, especially if you're making a box with a tray in it and you have to work out precise measurements. Bear in mind what you're going to lose with the saw curve. So what we'll do with this, because I'm happy with 87 mil, we then mark in 90 mil from the edge, do a mark, bring that down, and mark that is going to be the width of your sides. Now you can either draw straight onto here, or if you prefer, use a piece of masking tape and write on the masking tape. And that's your cut line there. So we'll mark that one in a minute. Then docking to length, what length do you want? If you remember, I actually cut these oversize. So I want this to be 250. There's my 250 mark there. And again, I'll put a mark. And that's what I've done. That's the actual length of the front and the back. Now the depth of the box, which I keep at 200, I don't mark that on here because that depth for the sides, the length of the sides will actually vary depending how thick material is for the front and the back. And depends what style of construction you're using, whether you're using a mitered joint or a lap joint or finger joints or dovetails. So that's something that you have to work out yourself. But here's the basic set out so you can get started on a box that's going to be the same if you make it now or if you make it in 10 years. These measurements are going to hold. So what I'll do, go over to the saw, just mark out or do saw cuts on these. And now it's important when you do the saw cuts for your lengths and widths that you use the same saw and the same saw blade you intend to use with your box making down the track. So if you're going to use a bandsaw, whatever bandsaw blade it is, if it's a 6 TPI 10mm, fine, use that to cut out on your storyboard. If you're using a table saw and you're using a 2mm blade, use that blade to sort out the cuts on the storyboard. If it's a 3mm blade, use that, but you have to be consistent so everything's going to be the same. So first of all, what I've got to do is move the fence into that cut. This is for when I'm rip sawing the front, the back and the sides. Because I want the 90mm width, what I have to do is line the saw up so the inside of the saw blade lines up with this cut here. Pull the safety guard down. And with this, I only have to go in about 1 inch. Dust extractor on. Fingers clear. Turn on blade. And that's it. It's all you have to do. Now that measurement from here to here is going to be 90mm. So when you actually come to cutting your box sides and ends and you want to rip them to the right length, it's then simply a matter from the blade to the outside, from there to there is going to be the distance you want. In this case it's 90mm for the boxes I make. Now the other thing we have to consider is when you're going to take the box lid off, what measurement do you need there? Again, what I would do on the opposite side of this, if this is going to be the width, I will mark where I want my box lids to come off, is just measure 60mm there, extend that line up just a little bit, and we do exactly the same thing, and that's your cut off. But obviously if that's the width of your box, you want to cut the top off, it's not going to be that wide, so just to make it easy, if you turn it over, that's going to give you 60mm. And if you're like me, you forget. So I'll put fence, base of box. So when I come to cut a box off, or the box lid off, come up to the saw again, line up the saw with that slot. Then it's just a matter of, and I'm not going to do it now, but I would take this off, get your box, that's the base of the box, that's the top of the box, hold it against your fence and cut. Now, cutting box lids off is a whole new subject, which I'll cover in another video. So this is the last one we have to do, and it will give you the actual length. So you can use this on a docking saw, or you could use it on a table saw, or you could do it with a hand saw, but I'll do it with this now Because my fence is so close, I can't put my guard down, but I'm only going in very, very shallowly, but I will use a miter box to make sure my fingers don't go anywhere near the blade. Dusty on, saw on. And that's it. So when I come to actually dock the lengths from my rough sawn sides, it's simply a question of, to line up with that, the blade then lines up with that slot there. I put a stop here or a clamp, then I get my pieces in there, put them, and they're all going to be docked to the same length. So there you have it. Spare bit, which I'll talk about later. And now you have a template for if you want to make more than one box. And you don't have to go measure, try and remember, look for that piece of paper you wrote in the measurements down. It might be an idea if you write on the back what sort of a box it is. It might be a jewellery box or something like that. And this bit here, this little bit, what I do is make some templates that I can use so I can set out my hinges if I'm doing a hinge box, and also how to mark nice, evenly spaced or geometrically spaced keys if you're using a miter joint and you want to put keys in it. But I'll cover that in a future video. So right now, that's it for this segment, and it's Steve pulling the shed door down and saying, remember to keep it sharp, but more importantly, keep it safe and enjoy your woodwork.